The first scream echoed through the awakening hall before anyone even realized what had happened. A crystal worth more than an entire kingdom suddenly shattered. Not cracked. Not chipped. Shattered. Thousands of glowing fragments shot across the room like stars exploding into existence. Silence followed. Then, another crystal exploded. The priests responsible for awakening new hunters stumbled backward, their faces drained of color. What? That has never happened before. The guild masters watching from the royal balcony slowly stood to their feet. This wasn't supposed to happen. One awakening crystal could evaluate a person's class. 2 crystals breaking in the same ceremony? Impossible. Then every remaining crystal inside the hall began to vibrate. The air grew heavier. Candles went out. The temperature dropped so fast that frost crept across the marble floor. For a brief moment, everyone felt as though something ancient had opened its eyes. And standing at the center of it all was the only person who looked more confused than everyone else. Kael Rowan. I don't think that's normal. No one laughed. Not yet. A blinding column of silver light erupted from beneath Kael's feet. Golden runes spiraled upward. Ancient symbols no one recognized floated through the air before disappearing into his body. Even the high priest looked terrified. I've never seen that language before. The awakening finally stabilized. The giant status screen hanging above the hall flickered into existence. Everyone leaned forward. Legendary classes often revealed themselves with dramatic effects. Dragon Knights, Archmages, Sword Saints, Spirit Kings. Perhaps a new hero had just been born. The letters slowly appeared. Primary class. Necromancer. The hall froze. Then someone snorted. Another laughed. Within seconds, the entire audience erupted. A necromancer? That's it. I thought the world was ending. All that noise for the weakest forbidden class? Kael blinked. Well, that explains the confidence boost. Laughter spread even faster. Then the screen changed again. Secondary talent. Healing. The laughter became uncontrollable. One adventurer actually fell off his chair. A healing necromancer? So, he heals corpses? Maybe he'll apologize to monsters after they attack him. Can dead people catch a cold now? Even Kael rubbed his forehead. I'll admit, this combination is impressively confusing. The guild masters who had stood moments earlier sat back down. Disappointed. One quietly crossed Kael's name off a recruitment list. Another muttered, "What a waste of talent." A noblewoman sighed. I thought we'd finally found another legendary hunter. Then, the shattered crystals began glowing again. Not repairing themselves. Moving. Every tiny fragment floated into the air. One by one, they circled Kael. Nobody breathed. The high priest whispered, "Why are they responding?" Without warning, every shard dissolved into silver dust and vanished into Kael's chest. The hall shook. Then, nothing. No announcement. No explanation. No new class. Just silence. Far beneath the capital. Hidden behind doors sealed for over 2,000 years. A stone statue opened its eyes. Its lips moved for the first time since the Age of Legends. The air. Dust rained from the ceiling. So, you finally returned. Then the statue went still again. No one above knew it had awakened. Back in the hall, the ceremony continued as if nothing had happened. No one cared about mysterious lights anymore. The word necromancer had already decided Kael's future. His childhood party stood together near the front. 5 people. The group he'd trained with for 7 years. The group he'd dreamed of entering dungeons with. Their leader, Darius, scratched the back of his neck awkwardly. Kael. Listen. This is difficult. Kael smiled faintly. It usually is when someone starts a sentence like that. A few nearby adventurers chuckled. Darius didn't. We voted. Kael's smile faded just a little. You voted. A mage stepped forward, refusing to meet his eyes. We can't risk taking a necromancer. The shield bearer added quietly. And a healer who can't even heal the living. It's just. You don't fit our future. 7 years. Training together. Promising to become heroes. Reduced to a vote that lasted less than a minute. Kael stood silent. Not because he was shocked. Because he already knew. The moment everyone laughed. He'd seen it in their eyes. People don't abandon you when you're weak. They abandon you the moment they believe you'll stay weak. Darius reached into his pocket. He pulled out the silver wolf pendant every member of their party wore. I think you should give yours back. Kael stared at it, then unclipped the pendant from around his neck. He placed it in Darius's hand. No hard feelings. The party looked surprised. Really? Kael shrugged. If someone has to convince themselves I'm the problem. They probably made the decision long before today. For the first time, no one had a comeback. As Kael turned toward the exit, a rotten tomato splattered against his shoulder. Someone shouted, "Don't trip over your own skeleton." Another voice yelled, "Maybe go work at a graveyard." The crowd burst into laughter again. Kael looked down at the tomato. At least they picked a ripe one. He brushed it off and kept walking. If he reacted, they'd get exactly what they wanted. If he didn't, they'd eventually get bored. Or so he thought. Because the moment he stepped outside the awakening hall, the sky turned black. Not with clouds. With ravens. Thousands of them. They circled directly above him. The streets fell silent. Every bird stared at Kael. Then, as one, they took flight toward the ancient mountains beyond the kingdom, leaving behind a single black feather. It drifted gently into his hand. The instant his fingers touched it, a voice no one else could hear echoed inside his mind. Candidate confirmed. A translucent window appeared before his eyes. Unlike every hunter status screen, this one was black, ancient, covered in symbols that shifted like living ink. Unknown system detected. The infinite growth system has accepted a new candidate. Synchronization, 0.01%. Compatibility, critically low. Current physical condition, embarrassing. Assessment, you would die instantly if you attempted to summon a true hero. Recommendation, fix yourself. Kael stared. Excuse me. The window flickered again. First mandatory quest. Complete. 50 push-ups. 100 squats. Run 5 kilometers. Stretch for 15 minutes. Time limit, before sunrise. Failure penalty. Candidate qualification revoked. Kael blinked. He looked around. No one else reacted. No one else could see it. He looked back at the message. Then up at the darkening sky. Then back at the message again. I awaken a necromancer. The world laughs at me. My party kicks me out. And now the mysterious ancient system that chose me. He sighed. Wants me to do leg day. He had absolutely no idea that completing this seemingly ridiculous quest would awaken the weakest summon in history. A tiny skeleton carrying an old leather medical bag. The little summon that would one day become the most feared being in existence. Kael stared at the floating black window for almost 10 seconds. Then he looked behind him. The busy streets of Ironridge carried on as if nothing had happened. Merchants shouted. Children chased each other between market stalls. An old woman argued with a fish seller over 2 copper coins. Nobody noticed the ancient black screen floating inches from his face. Either I've lost my mind. He reached toward the screen. Or I'm having the most expensive hallucination in history. His fingers passed straight through it. The window rippled like black water. Reminder. Remaining time. 7 hours 12 minutes. Candidate is wasting valuable time. It has attitude. A new mystery. Kael started walking. Fast. If this thing was real, arguing with it wouldn't help. Besides, the system hadn't offered gold. Or a weapon. Or a legendary skill. It wanted exercise. I've definitely been scammed. Halfway home, a voice stopped him. Kael. He turned. A little girl no older than 9 ran toward him, weaving between startled pedestrians. Lena, his little sister. She threw herself into his arms. I heard what happened. Kael smiled for the first time all day. So the entire city already knows? She nodded. Mostly because grown adults apparently have nothing better to gossip about. He laughed. Fair point. Then she hesitated. They're lying, right? You didn't awaken a useless class? For just a moment, he considered lying, telling her everything would be fine. But she'd always been able to tell. So he crouched until they were eye level. I awakened a class. She waited. People decided it was useless. That's not the same thing. Lena blinked, then smiled. I knew you'd say something smart. Another hook. A carriage rolled past. Inside sat Darius and the rest of Kael's former party. None of them looked outside. Except one. Mira, the healer. She glanced at Kael. Their eyes met for less than a second. She looked away immediately. Guilt. Interesting. So not everyone had agreed with the decision. Kael stored that observation away. People revealed more through silence than words. The system interrupts. Observation logged. Candidate notices behavioral inconsistencies. Hidden trait confirmed. Strategic insight. Reward. +1 perception. Kael froze. Hold on. I got stronger. For noticing someone looked guilty? A second message appeared. Many battles are won before the first sword is drawn. He looked around suspiciously. Who's writing these? Silence. Figures. Home. Their house stood at the edge of town. Small. Old. The roof leaned slightly to one side. His mother was already waiting outside. Not crying. Not panicking. Just smiling warmly. So. You finally came home. Kael scratched his head. You heard. She nodded. The neighbors made sure I did. He sighed. I'm sorry. She gently flicked his forehead. What exactly are you apologizing for? I embarrassed. No. Her voice became unusually firm. You embarrassed people who judge children by words floating above their heads. She stepped closer. I raised a son. Not a status screen. For the first time all day, the weight on Kael's shoulders became just a little lighter. But then, the system chimed. Hidden quest completed. Accepted comfort without pride. Reward. +2 mental stability. What? Mental stability. He frowned. What kind of stat is that? No explanation. Again. Training begins. As sunset painted the sky orange, Kael walked behind the house. There was just enough open land. He stretched, cracked his neck, looked down. 50 push-ups. He hadn't done that many in months. This'll be easy. It wasn't. At 23, his arms trembled. At 31, his face met the dirt. He lay there for several seconds. This system is a bully. Incorrect assessment. Candidate is simply weak. Did it just insult me? Comedy turns to mystery. By the time he finished the squats, his legs felt like jelly. The run was even worse. 3 kilometers in, he nearly collapsed. His lungs burned. His vision blurred. Then, he noticed something strange. The farther he ran from town, the quieter the forest became. No birds. No insects. Nothing. Only the sound of his breathing. Crunch. His foot landed on something. A bone. He looked down. Not animal. Human. Another lay nearby. Then another. Then dozens. Half buried beneath moss. The forest floor wasn't covered in rocks. It was covered in ancient skeletons. Kael slowly looked ahead. Broken stone pillars rose from the trees. Ruined walls. Collapsed statues. An abandoned cemetery. He frowned. I've lived here my whole life. How have I never seen this place? The black system window appeared instantly. Its ancient symbols glowed brighter than before. Hidden location discovered. The forgotten resting grounds. Probability of discovery. 0.0008%. Synchronization increased. 0.01%, 0.1%. Kael's heartbeat quickened. Wait. It wanted me to run here. This wasn't exercise. The exercise had been an excuse. The system had guided him. Before he could take another step, the temperature dropped. A cold wind swept through the cemetery. Every loose bone on the ground rattled at once. Clack, clack, clack. Something beneath the earth moved. The first enemy. A skeletal hand burst through the soil. Then another. Then 5 more. Rusted helmets emerged from shallow graves. Ancient warriors. Their empty eye sockets slowly filled with ghostly blue flames. Kael instinctively stepped backward. Okay. I officially regret every life decision that brought me here. Emergency quest. Survive. Reward. Continue living. That's the reward? The first skeleton pulled itself free. It wore the shattered armor of a forgotten kingdom. Despite centuries underground, it still gripped a cracked sword. More skeletons climbed out. 10, 20, 30. Kael's mind raced. I can't fight 30 undead. I don't even have a weapon. He scanned the surroundings. Broken gravestones. Fallen columns. Uneven ground. Good. Terrain could be a weapon. If he couldn't overpower them, he'd outthink them. But as the nearest skeleton raised its blade, the black system suddenly flashed crimson. Not once. 3 times. As if something impossible had just happened. Warning. A soul has recognized the candidate. Contract request received. Accept. Kael stared. A contract. Already. Then every skeleton on the battlefield stopped moving at exactly the same moment. Not attacking. Not retreating. Waiting. As though they were expecting someone else to make the first move. And from the oldest grave in the cemetery, a tiny bony hand slowly pushed open the cracked stone lid. Not holding a sword. Not holding a shield. But clutching a worn leather medical bag. For a heartbeat, the battlefield froze. 30 undead warriors stood perfectly still. Their swords remained raised. Not one of them attacked. Not one of them blinked. Not one of them even twitched. It felt less like they were waiting, and more like they had been ordered to wait. Only, Kael hadn't given any orders. Either this is a trap, or someone here has remarkably good manners. The tiny hand gripped the edge of the stone coffin. With surprising effort, it pulled itself out. Kael expected a terrifying undead monster. A giant skeletal knight. A cursed lich. Something worthy of all the ominous warnings. Instead, a skeleton barely taller than his knee climbed onto the grass. Silence. It wore a faded white coat stitched together from ancient cloth. A tiny leather satchel hung from one shoulder. Around its neck dangled cracked spectacles with one missing lens. Its skull was slightly too large for its tiny body, giving it an oddly adorable appearance. It looked around, adjusted the crooked glasses, then spotted Kael. Its empty eye sockets widened. The little skeleton gasped, then sprinted toward him with all the enthusiasm of a puppy that had finally found its owner. Wait. Why is it running at me? The skeleton tripped over its own feet, rolled twice, stood back up, dusted itself off with complete dignity, then continued running. Kael couldn't help it. He laughed. I don't think you're supposed to be intimidating. System. Contract candidate identified. Name. Unknown. Classification. Soul medic. Rank. Unmeasurable. Compatibility. 100%. Recommendation. Accept immediately. Kael frowned. Unmeasurable. That doesn't sound like a real rank. The skeleton finally reached him. It stopped, straightened its little coat, then bowed so deeply that its skull almost fell off. Its head actually rolled onto the ground. The skeleton stared at its own head. Kael stared at the head. The skeleton quickly picked it up, placed it back on its neck, then bowed again. Let's pretend that didn't happen. The skeleton gave him an enthusiastic thumbs up. Another mystery. The black screen shimmered again. Would you like to establish the first eternal contract? Warning. This contract cannot be broken. Souls bound through the infinite growth system remain together until the final end of existence. Kael's smile faded. That's a little more serious than clicking I accept on a user agreement. He crouched in front of the tiny skeleton. You don't understand what this means, do you? The skeleton immediately shook its head, then nodded, then shrugged. Helpful. Kael studied it carefully. No hostility, no hatred, no signs of corruption, just hope, as though it had been waiting for an incredibly long time. I have one question. The skeleton tilted its head. Why me? Instead of answering, it slowly opened its medical bag. Inside were hundreds of carefully preserved bandages, ancient medicines, tiny glass bottles, old surgical tools polished until they shone. Nothing designed to kill, everything designed to save. Then, it reached into the very bottom, pulled out a faded photograph. The image had almost disappeared with age, but one figure remained visible. A young man, standing beside dozens of legendary heroes. Every one of them knelt before him. The man's face had been completely burned away. Only one word remained written beneath the picture. Majesty. Kael felt a chill run down his spine. Who was he? The skeleton gently touched the burned face. Its tiny shoulders slumped. Then, it looked at Kael. Slowly, it pointed at him. No. Kael immediately shook his head. You've got the wrong person. The skeleton didn't argue. It simply smiled, as though it had heard that answer before. Contract established. Kael took a deep breath. If this turns out to be a terrible decision, I'm blaming future me. He pressed his hand against the skeleton's tiny hand. The world exploded into silver light. Every skeleton warrior in the cemetery immediately knelt. 30 swords struck the earth simultaneously. The sound echoed across the valley like thunder. Far away, hidden beneath mountains, ancient bells rang for the first time in 2,000 years. Deep inside forgotten ruins, stone statues slowly opened their eyes. Across distant kingdoms, powerful beings looked toward the same horizon. One old dragon sleeping beneath an active volcano opened a single golden eye. Impossible. The first contract has been restored. Then the dragon smiled. So, the child has finally arrived. System. Congratulations. First eternal contract complete. Summon registered. Name pending. Please assign a name. The tiny skeleton looked up at Kael with obvious excitement. Oh. So I get to name you. It nodded enthusiastically. Kael looked at the oversized medical bag, then the crooked glasses, then remembered the spectacular way its head had rolled off 30 seconds ago. You know, you don't exactly inspire fear. The skeleton puffed out its tiny chest proudly. Kael grinned. Then from today onward, your name is Doc. The skeleton froze. Its blue soul flames sparkled. It hugged Kael's leg with surprising force. Hidden reward. Soul has accepted its true name. Bond stability. 12%, 48%. Passive skill unlocked. Shared growth. Every improvement made by the master slightly strengthens contracted souls. Every improvement made by contracted souls slightly strengthens the master. Kael blinked. Hold on. So if I get stronger, Doc gets stronger. And if Doc grows, I grow too. The system remained silent. Silence usually meant yes. The first test. Without warning, one of the kneeling skeleton warriors stood. Its blue flames turned crimson. Another followed. Then another. The peaceful atmosphere shattered. Doc immediately stepped in front of Kael. The tiny skeleton spread both arms as if trying to shield him. The corrupted skeleton captain slowly raised its rusted sword. A new message appeared. Emergency notice. External corruption detected. These souls can no longer be saved. Eliminate them. Protect your first companion. Kael looked at the approaching undead. Then at Doc. Then at his own empty hands. No weapon. No combat skills. One tiny skeleton doctor. He sighed. This may be the shortest hero career in recorded history. But then, Doc reached into his medical bag. Not for medicine. Not for bandages. From a hidden compartment, the tiny skeleton carefully pulled out an ancient black scalpel. The moment it appeared, the blade emitted an aura so overwhelming that every corrupted skeleton instinctively stepped backward. Even Kael felt goosebumps. The tiny skeleton, who couldn't even keep its own head attached, was holding a weapon that terrified an entire cemetery. And before Kael could ask where it came from, the system displayed a message that made his blood run cold. Legendary relic identified. Soul surgeon. Former owner. Unknown. Current authorization. Denied. Reason. The rightful owner is still alive. Kael's heartbeat stopped. Still alive. The cemetery belonged to a civilization that had vanished 2,000 years ago. So how could the owner of that relic still be alive? Still alive. Kael read the words again. Then a third time. No, that had to be wrong. The civilization buried beneath this cemetery had disappeared over 2,000 years ago. Kingdoms had risen. Empires had fallen. Entire mountain ranges had changed. Nobody lived that long. Unless... His stomach tightened. History is lying. The tiny skeleton, Doc, held the black scalpel with both hands. Its little arms trembled. Not because the weapon was heavy. Because it was fighting him. The blade pulsed like a living heart. Dark veins of light crawled across its surface. It wanted to escape. Warning. Soul Surgeon is rejecting temporary bearer. Synchronization. 3%. If synchronization reaches 0%, legendary relic will return to its owner. Return. Kael whispered. To where? The system didn't answer. It never answered the easy questions. The first attack. Crack. A rusted sword slammed into the ground exactly where Kael had been standing. He had moved on instinct. Barely. Dust exploded into the air. The corrupted skeleton captain didn't pause. Its movements were smooth. Precise. Far too skilled for an ordinary undead. Kael's eyes narrowed. That wasn't random. It had aimed where he was going. Not where he had been. It could predict movement. Another sword came from the left. Kael ducked. A spear shot from behind. He rolled. 3 enemies. Perfect coordination. They're communicating. No, not communicating. They were thinking together. Perception increased. Hidden analysis successful. Reward. +1 tactical insight. Again. So noticing things actually levels me up? A dangerous smile crept across his face. Now that's interesting. The battlefield changes. Kael didn't look at the enemies. He looked at the cemetery. Broken pillars. Uneven graves. Loose stones. A collapsed angel statue. Most people fought enemies. Kael fought battlefields. If I can't beat them, I'll make the terrain beat them. He sprinted toward the oldest mausoleum. The skeletons chased him immediately. Exactly as planned. 3, 5, 7. Good. Keep following. One skeleton leaped. Too early. Kael slid beneath a cracked support pillar. His shoulder slammed into the ancient stone. Nothing happened. Seriously. Then, crack! The entire pillar gave way. Tons of stone crashed downward. 4 skeletons disappeared beneath the rubble. Enemy eliminated. Experience granted. I didn't even hit them. The battlefield is also a weapon. I like this system. But something was wrong. The remaining skeletons stopped. Not because they were afraid. Because they were learning. The captain slowly looked at the fallen pillar. Then, changed formation. Kael blinked. They adapted. That wasn't normal monster behavior. Most dungeon creatures repeated the same attacks until they died. These were improving every second. Doc's strange ability. Doc suddenly tugged on Kael's sleeve. The tiny skeleton pointed toward one of the buried warriors. Not the corrupted captain. Another one. Its blue flames flickered weakly beneath the corruption. Doc looked sad. You know him. Doc nodded. Slowly. Then pressed one tiny hand against his own rib cage. Friend. Another nod. Kael looked between Doc and the skeleton. Can he be saved? Doc hesitated. Then raised one finger. One chance. Doc nodded vigorously. The system immediately appeared. Hidden option detected. Corrupted souls may be purified, but only if defeated without destroying the soul core. Kael inhaled sharply. So everyone else has been killing them. Bigger mystery. If undead could be purified, why did every history book say they had to be destroyed? Who benefited from that lie? No time. The captain charged again. This time much faster. The rusted blade cut through the air with frightening precision. Kael stepped sideways. Too slow. The sword sliced across his shoulder. Blood splashed onto the grass. Pain exploded through his arm. Doc panicked. The tiny skeleton rushed over. Bandages flew from his medical bag like white ribbons. Within seconds, Kael's shoulder was wrapped so tightly he couldn't move it. Document. The skeleton looked proud. I appreciate the enthusiasm. But I still need that arm. Doc froze. Then awkwardly loosened the bandages. Kael laughed despite the situation. You'll get better. Doc proudly saluted. The hidden skill. As Doc finished treating the wound, a golden glow spread through the bandages. Not white. Not green. Gold. The corruption on Kael's blood disappeared. Passive skill discovered. Purifying treatment. Your contracted soul medic can remove curses before they take root. Kael frowned. Curses? I wasn't cursed. Correction. You were. Detection speed. 0.8 seconds. That's concerning. The captain speaks. Without warning, the corrupted captain lowered his sword. Its crimson eyes locked onto Kael. Then, in a dry, broken voice, it spoke. Master. Kael froze. What? The other skeletons immediately turned toward the captain. Even Doc stood perfectly still. The captain slowly reached toward Kael. Why did you abandon us? Silence. The wind stopped. Even the trees seemed to hold their breath. Kael's heart pounded. I've never met you. The captain tilted its skull. Lie. Then, without warning, it screamed. A scream filled with 2,000 years of grief. The corruption completely consumed its body. Its bones turned black. Armor melted into shadow. Its size doubled, then tripled. The rusted sword shattered, reforming into a colossal black greatsword. The system flashed crimson. Again. 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 Warning. Corrupted soul has entered forced evolution. Threat assessment updated. From Frank to B rank. Survival probability. 2.4%. Kael slowly looked at Doc. Doc slowly looked back. Neither of them said anything. Finally, Kael sighed. Remember when this was just about jogging? Doc nodded. Very sadly. Then the impossible happened. Before the giant skeleton could attack, the black scalpel in Doc's hands erupted with blinding silver light. Not dark. Silver. Ancient symbols raced across its blade. For just 1 second, everyone heard a woman's voice. Gentle. Calm. Filled with sorrow. If my child is finally awake, tell him. The voice abruptly cut off. The relic went silent. Doc stared at the scalpel. Kael stared at Doc. The giant corrupted captain slowly fell to one knee. Not in pain. Not in fear. In recognition. Then it whispered 5 words that made Kael's blood run cold. The crown has returned. The ground beneath the cemetery began to shake violently. One by one, Hundreds, then thousands, of skeletal hands burst through the earth. Not to attack, to salute. Thousands of skeletal hands reached through the earth, one after another. The entire cemetery seemed to come alive. Stone graves cracked open. Ancient helmets emerged from the soil. Broken shields, spears, banners so old they crumbled into dust the moment they touched the air. Kael slowly swallowed. I'm beginning to think this isn't an ordinary cemetery. Doc tugged on his sleeve. The little skeleton shook his head rapidly. Not danger. Something else. He looked excited. The first skeleton climbed completely out of its grave. Unlike the corrupted captain, its soul flame burned a peaceful sapphire blue. It looked directly at Kael, then kneeled. Its sword touched the ground. Clang. Another skeleton emerged. Clang. Then another. Clang. Within seconds, the sound echoed across the valley like falling rain. Thousands of ancient warriors were kneeling, not attacking, waiting. Kael scratched his cheek. Well, this is somehow more terrifying. The captain's struggle. The corrupted giant remained frozen. Black smoke poured from the cracks in its armor. Its crimson eyes flickered violently. Red, blue, red, blue. It was fighting itself. Kael noticed immediately. It's resisting. The corruption wasn't complete. Something inside was refusing to surrender. Observation confirmed. Hidden trait. Soul insight. Level 1 acquired. Kael blinked. I've unlocked more skills by paying attention than by fighting. A name buried by time. Without warning, one of the kneeling skeletons spoke. Its voice was rough with age. Commander. Another whispered. Majesty. A third said something different. Your Highness. Kael frowned. Can you all please agree on one title? Silence. Then, the oldest skeleton slowly raised its skull. We no longer remember. The cemetery became eerily quiet. We remember serving. We remember victory. We remember betrayal. But its blue flames trembled. We no longer remember our own names. Kael's expression changed. No jokes. No sarcasm. Only silence. How long had they been waiting? How much had they lost? Doc quietly lowered his head. Tiny shoulders trembling. Another hidden mechanic. The black system appeared. Hidden world effect detected. Forgotten souls gradually lose their identities. Time erases memory. Memory preserves power. A soul without a name cannot become whole. Kael read the last sentence twice, then slowly looked at Doc. Is that why naming you strengthened our bond? Doc nodded enthusiastically. So, if these people remember who they were, they'll become stronger? No answer, but the silence felt hopeful. The first choice. The oldest skeleton stepped forward, slowly, respectfully. It presented an ancient bronze badge. Most of its markings had worn away. Only one symbol remained. A crown, surrounded by wings. Unknown item. Memory seal. Function. Locked. The system displayed something unusual. No explanation. No recommendation. Instead, it asked Kael a question. Would you like to restore this soul's memory? Cost. 10 soul capacity. Kael immediately frowned. I have how much soul capacity? Current soul capacity. 2. So I'm 8 short. The oldest skeleton smiled gently. Not yet. Young Majesty. Then stepped back. No disappointment. Only patience. As though waiting another 100 years wouldn't bother him. Meanwhile, hundreds of kilometers away, deep inside the Holy Kingdom, a silver-haired cardinal suddenly dropped the ancient scroll she had been reading. The holy relic beside her had started bleeding. Not with blood. With black ink. Her face turned pale. No. She whispered. It can't be. She rushed toward a sealed chamber beneath the cathedral. Massive chains wrapped around a gigantic stone door. At its center, an inscription. Do not open until the necromancer returns. The cardinal stared at the words. Who wrote this? She had served the church for 40 years. She had never seen that inscription before. Back at the cemetery, Kael noticed something odd. Every blue-flamed skeleton stood perfectly still, except one. A tiny skeleton child peeked from behind a broken gravestone. It wore armor far too large for its little body. The helmet kept sliding over its eye sockets. Every time it tried to salute, the helmet spun around backwards. Kael couldn't help smiling. You look ridiculous. The little skeleton froze. Embarrassed, it quickly tried fixing the helmet, only to accidentally put it on upside down. Doc burst into silent laughter, clutching his ribs. The little skeleton puffed out its chest indignantly, crossed its tiny arms, and turned away as if deeply offended. Kael chuckled. Great. Now I've offended a skeleton. The calm before the storm. The ground shook again. Harder this time. Not from beneath. From beyond the cemetery. Kael turned toward the forest. The birds had vanished. The wind had stopped. Even the insects had gone silent. Something enormous was approaching. Crunch, crunch, crunch. Each footstep snapped trees like twigs. The peaceful blue-flamed skeletons slowly stood, not to attack Kael, to stand between him and whatever was coming. The oldest skeleton whispered only one sentence. He found us. The system goes silent, then panics. For the first time since awakening, the infinite growth system failed to display its usual calm black window. Instead, dozens of messages erupted across Kael's vision all at once. Warning. Hide. Warning. Do not engage. Warning. Synchronization too low. Warning. Candidate death probability. 99.97%. Then, the messages disappeared, replaced by one line, one sentence. Unlike every notification before, this one looked as though someone had typed it manually. Not the system. Someone inside it. I'm sorry, you're not ready to meet him yet. Kael's heart skipped. Wait. You can talk. No answer. The forest exploded. A colossal black spear crashed into the cemetery from miles away. The impact obliterated 50 graves in a single strike. The peaceful skeletons didn't flinch. Instead, every one of them bowed their heads. Not in surrender. In mourning. Then a deep voice echoed through the valley. Come, cold, ancient. Return him. He does not belong to this age. Kael looked toward the shattered tree-line. A lone figure stepped out of the darkness. Tall, wrapped in black armor covered in cracks that glowed with crimson light. No face. Only two burning golden eyes beneath a broken crown. Doc saw him, dropped the soul surgeon's scalpel, and for the first time since they met, the tiny skeleton was trembling in fear. Then the impossible happened. The mysterious warrior slowly removed his helmet, looked directly at Kael, and smiled. Like an old friend. You've grown. Kael had never seen this man before in his life. Yet somehow, the stranger spoke as if they had said goodbye only yesterday. The mysterious warrior stared at Kael. A smile rested beneath his broken helmet. You're finally awake. The cemetery was silent. Thousands of undead soldiers watched. Doc trembled. Kael was confused. Very confused. Because there was one tiny problem. I have no idea who you are. The warrior's smile disappeared. Only for a moment. Then he laughed. Not angrily. Not mockingly. Almost sadly. Of course. He looked at the sky. Your memories have not returned. Kael immediately noticed something. The warrior didn't say, "You don't remember me." He said, "Your memories have not returned." Meaning, he believed Kael had forgotten. Not that they had never met. The system suddenly appeared. For the first time, it didn't look calm. Unknown entity detected. Threat classification. Unable to calculate. Recommendation. Leave immediately. Kael's eyes narrowed. The system could calculate monsters. It could calculate his own abilities. But this person, it couldn't. That alone was terrifying. The warrior stepped forward. Every skeleton in the cemetery immediately tightened their grip on their weapons. Not toward Kael. Toward him. Interesting. Kael noticed. They aren't protecting him. They're protecting me. The warrior stopped. Then looked at Doc. His expression changed. A strange mixture of surprise and sadness. The soul medic. So you found him first. Doc hid slightly behind Kael. The warrior lowered his eyes. Good. At least one of us was able to keep his promise. Kael's brain started working. Promise. Who made a promise? And why was Doc involved? But before he could ask, the warrior stepped backward. The black armor around his body began breaking apart into shadows. I cannot stay. Kael frowned. Wait. You appeared, said things that make no sense, scared my skeleton friend, and now you're leaving? The warrior paused. Then looked amused. Some things never change. Kael raised an eyebrow. Was that supposed to be funny? Yes. It wasn't. I know. For some reason, Kael liked him slightly less, which was impressive considering he knew almost nothing about him. The warrior looked at Doc one last time, then at Kael. When the time comes, do not trust the ones who call themselves heroes. The shadows covered his body. And remember, you were never chosen because you were strong. You were chosen because you were willing to become strong. Then he disappeared. Completely. Silence. Kael looked around. The thousands of skeleton soldiers were still kneeling. Then he looked at Doc. Doc looked back. Both were silent. Finally, Kael sighed. I have questions. Doc nodded. I have many questions. Doc nodded again. You don't have answers, do you? Doc shook his head. Great. 2 days ago my biggest problem was finding a job. Now I'm apparently connected to a forgotten civilization. He looked at the cemetery. And I still have homework. The system immediately appeared. Quest progress updated. Daily training. Push-ups. 50/50ths. Squats. 100/100. Running. 5/5 kilometer. Stretching. 15/15 minutes. Completion. 100%. Reward available. Kael smiled. Finally. Something normal. A reward. Give me something useful. Weapon. Skill. Anything. The screen changed. Reward. Beginner Necromancer skill unlocked. Summon skeleton. Kael grinned. Finally. His first real Necromancer ability. He looked toward the battlefield. Okay. Let's see what I can summon. He raised his hand. Focused his mana. The air became cold. Black magic gathered around his fingers. A circle appeared. The ground shook. Doc watched excitedly. Then, nothing happened. Kael waited. 5 seconds. 10 seconds. 30 seconds. Is it supposed to take this long? The magic circle flickered. Then a tiny message appeared. Summoning failed. Kael froze. Failed. Another message. Cause. Insufficient soul capacity. Doc slowly raised one finger, as if politely pointing out something. Kael looked at him. What? Doc pointed toward himself. Then the thousands of skeletons behind them. Then back at Kael. The message appeared again. Current soul capacity. 2. Existing contract. 1. Available summons. 0. Kael stared. So. You're telling me. I unlocked necromancy. But I can't summon anything? The system responded. Correct. A vein appeared on Kael's forehead. That seems like important information you should have mentioned earlier. Candidate did not ask. Kael stared. I hate this system. Doc patted his leg, comforting him. Unfortunately, the little skeleton accidentally poked him with a bone finger. Kael looked down. Your comforting technique needs work. The first real problem. Kael returned home before sunrise. He had gained something incredible. A mysterious system. A loyal skeleton. A connection to ancient warriors. And the ability to summon undead. Except, he couldn't summon undead. The next morning, the entire town learned something. Kael Rowan had awakened as a necromancer, and failed his first summon attempt. The rumors spread instantly. Even his own class rejected him. The system probably made a mistake. He can't even summon a skeleton. Imagine being a necromancer without skeletons. At the Hunter Guild, Darius heard the news. He laughed. Not because it was funny. Because he felt relieved. See, I told everyone. Leaving him was the right choice. But Mira, the healer who had looked away yesterday, was silent. Did you actually see him fail? Darius frowned. What? Did you see the summoning fail? She looked directly at him. No, nobody did. That bothered her. Because she remembered something. Before Kael left the awakening hall, every crystal in the room broke, and the high priest looked afraid. Meanwhile, deep inside the forest, Kael was training again. But this time, he wasn't alone. Doc stood beside him wearing a tiny backpack. Inside, bandages, medicine, a notebook, and a small wooden whistle. Kael looked at it. Why do you have a whistle? Doc proudly showed him, then blew. A sound echoed. Nothing happened. Kael waited. Was that supposed to summon something? Doc nodded. 5 seconds later, a tiny skeleton rabbit crawled out from behind a tree. It looked at Kael, sneezed, then fell over. Kael stared. Doc looked proud. The system appeared. Hidden achievement completed. First undead friendship created. Reward. +1 soul capacity. Kael froze. 1 number. That was all. But it mattered. Soul capacity. 2-3. He looked at Doc. Then the tiny skeleton rabbit. Then the forest. A slow smile appeared. Okay. So that's how this works. The system didn't reward killing. It rewarded creation, connection, growth. Then, a new notification appeared. Hidden quest available. Objective. Create a settlement for abandoned creatures. Reward. Unknown. Kael frowned. Settlement. I'm a failed necromancer. I don't even have enough power to summon skeletons. The screen flickered. A final message appeared. Every kingdom begins with one person. Kael stared. Because somewhere deep inside, he knew. This wasn't just about becoming stronger. The system wasn't building an army. It was building something much bigger. Far away, on the border of the kingdom, a messenger arrived carrying urgent news. A monster wave had appeared. The nearest villages had 3 days before destruction. The Hunter Guild prepared elite teams. The strongest warriors were mobilized. Nobody considered one person, the weakest necromancer, because everyone believed Kael Rowan was useless, and that mistake would soon become their greatest rigor. 3 days. That was how long the border villages had left. 3 days before the monster wave arrived. 3 days before thousands of creatures would pour out from the Blackroot Forest. 3 days before ordinary people who had never held a sword would become victims of a battle between monsters and heroes. Inside the Hunter Guild, the atmosphere was completely different from usual. No laughter, no celebrations, no drinking, only maps, numbers, and fear. The wave is larger than expected. A guild officer placed a report on the table. Estimated monsters? Another officer swallowed. At least 800. Silence. 800 monsters wasn't an impossible number. 4 elite hunters. It was manageable. But the problem wasn't the number. It was the type. The officer continued. 30% are evolved creatures. Several C-rank variants. Possibly 1 B-rank leader. The room became tense. A B-rank monster in a monster wave meant one thing. Someone was controlling them. Darius crossed his arms confidently. Our party will participate. Several guild members looked impressed. The newly awakened heroes of Ironridge. A talented swordsman. A powerful mage. A skilled healer. Everyone expected them to rise quickly. Darius smiled. This is our chance to prove ourselves. Mira looked down. She wasn't thinking about the monster wave. She was thinking about Kael. Meanwhile, Kael was fighting a tree. Not a metaphor. An actual tree. 198. Punch. 199. Punch. 200. He stepped back. His fist hurt. The tree was fine. The system appeared. Training completed. Strength. 12, 13. Kael stared. 1 point. After punching a tree 200 times? Correct. Do you know how insulting that sounds? Yes. Kael paused. Did you just admit that? No response. Doc stood nearby taking notes. The little skeleton carefully wrote something in his notebook. Kael glanced over. What are you writing? Doc turned the notebook around. Master complains frequently. Kael stared. You can write. Doc nodded proudly. He flipped the page. Another note. Master complains but continues. Kael couldn't argue. Because, unfortunately, that was accurate. Small growth. The last week had changed him. Not dramatically. He wasn't suddenly a monster. But he was different. Before, he had been someone who avoided conflict. Now, he analyzed everything. Every movement. Every weakness. Every possibility. The system hadn't given him power. It had changed how he thought. A notification appeared. Hidden trait evolution. Strategic insight. Level 1, Level 2. Effect. Improved battlefield analysis. Kael smiled. Now that is useful. Then, a new notification appeared. Emergency quest. Protect the abandoned village of Elderwood. Objective. Keep civilians alive. Reward. Unknown. Failure. Village destroyed. Kael frowned. Elderwood. A map appeared. A small village on the edge of the Blackroot Forest. Population. 143 people. Defense. Almost none. Kael immediately noticed something. Why isn't the Hunter Guild defending them? The system answered. Priority classification. Low value settlement. Kael's expression changed. Low value. That meant nobody important lived there. The road to Elderwood took 6 hours. Normally, hunters traveled in groups. Kael traveled with one tiny skeleton rabbit, and a medical bag. People stared. Some laughed. Some whispered. Is that his summon? That's embarrassing. He brought a pet skeleton to fight monsters? Kael ignored them. But Doc didn't. The little skeleton looked offended. He crossed his arms. Then secretly gave the rude people a tiny wave. Kael noticed. You know. Being passive-aggressive is strange when you have no facial expressions. Doc tilted his head. Then gave a thumbs up. Elderwood Village. When Kael arrived, he immediately understood why the guild ignored it. The walls were broken. The guards were old. The weapons were outdated. The village wasn't prepared for a monster wave. Not even close. An old man approached. You are the hunter sent by the guild? Kael hesitated. Something like that. The old man's face brightened. Then he saw Doc. The smile disappeared. Kael waited. The old man looked at the skeleton. Then at Kael. Then back at the skeleton. Should we be concerned? Kael sighed. That depends. Can your village survive without a skeleton doctor? The old man blinked. What? The first emotional hook. That evening, Kael walked through the village. And he noticed something. Children. Dozens of them. Playing near broken houses. Families repairing damaged walls themselves. Farmers sharing food despite having barely enough. A village with almost nothing. still trying to protect what they had. A little boy approached. He looked at Doc. Is he your friend? Kael looked down. Before he could answer, Doc nodded. The child smiled. He's cool. Kael froze, because that was the first time anyone outside his family had looked at Doc without laughing. The boy whispered, My dad says monsters are coming. Are we going to die? Kael looked at the terrified child. He could lie. Tell him everything would be fine. But Kael hated empty promises. So he said, I don't know. The boy looked scared. Then Kael continued, But I know something. The child looked up. I don't like losing. The boy smiled slightly. Night falls. At midnight, Kael stood on the village wall. Doc beside him. The forest was silent. Too silent. Then, a sound. Crunch, crunch, crunch. Hundreds of footsteps. The monster wave had arrived early. Kael looked into the darkness. His eyes narrowed. This isn't right. The system appeared. Warning. Monster wave timing altered. Cause. External interference. Kael's expression hardened. Someone changed the event. A second message appeared. Additional information. Enemy intelligence detected. Kael looked toward the forest. The monsters weren't rushing. They were moving carefully. Organized. Like soldiers. Then the trees split apart. A massive creature stepped forward. A monster unlike anything Kael had seen. 4 arms. Black armor-like skin. Golden eyes. And around its neck, a human-made necklace. Kael stared. Because monsters didn't use human equipment. They didn't organize armies. They didn't plan. The creature looked directly at him. Then spoke. A deep voice. Clear. Intelligent. Finally. The failed necromancer has arrived. Kael's eyes widened. Wait. You know me. The monster smiled. No. I know what you become. The system immediately went wild. Warning. 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 Unknown future knowledge detected. Source. The monster raised its weapon. The entire forest moved behind it. Thousands of monsters emerged. Then it said, Before you become the king of the dead, I will kill you while you are still weak. The battlefield became silent. Not peaceful. Silent. The kind of silence that exists moments before something breaks. Behind the monster commander, hundreds of creatures emerged from the Blackroot forest. Goblins carrying stolen weapons. Wolves covered in dark scales. Creatures with glowing marks carved into their bodies. They weren't charging. They were waiting. That was the first thing Kael noticed. The second thing was much worse. They were organized. A normal monster wave was chaos. Monsters attacked because they were hungry. Because they were territorial. Because they were controlled by instinct. But these creatures, they stood in formation. The stronger monsters protected the weaker ones. The injured stayed behind the front line. The fastest creatures guarded the sides. Someone had trained them. Kael's eyes narrowed. Monsters don't fight like this. The 4-armed creature smiled. Good. You noticed. Kael didn't answer. He was studying everything. The creature's stance. Its weapon. Its armor. The way the monsters reacted to its voice. Intelligence. Not animal intelligence. Human-level intelligence. Maybe higher. The monster stepped forward. My name is Varkan, commander of the Blackroot Legion. Kael blinked. A monster introducing itself. He looked at Doc. Is this normal? Doc shook his head. Good. Because I was worried I had missed a very strange part of monster education. For a moment, the monster looked confused. Then it laughed. A deep laugh that shook the trees. I understand now. The records were correct. Kael's expression changed. Records. Varkan smiled. The future version of you was right. The air changed. Even Doc stopped moving. Kael stared. What did you just say? The monster pointed at him. That expression. That calculation. You always looked at problems the same way. Kael's heartbeat increased. Not because he was afraid. Because he was thinking. This creature wasn't trying to intimidate him. It was giving information. Why? You know me. Varkan nodded. I know the person you become. Who sent you? The monster didn't answer. Instead, it looked toward the village. At the frightened civilians hiding behind the walls. Then back at Kael. I was curious. Would the person who saved the world still choose to save a village nobody cared about? Kael froze. Another mystery. Saved the world. Him. That made no sense. He couldn't even summon a skeleton. I think you have the wrong person. Varkan smiled. No. That's exactly why this is interesting. The monster raised its weapon. A massive black axe. The ground cracked beneath it. Everyone thinks power creates a hero. But you always became powerful after making the choice. Kael's eyes narrowed. You're not here to kill me. The monsters behind Varkan shifted. The commander tilted his head. Explain. If you wanted me dead, you wouldn't be talking. You would attack immediately. Silence. Kael continued. You came here because you want to see something. Varkan smiled. Very good. What? You're already becoming him. The attack begins. Suddenly, the ground exploded. Not from Varkan. From beneath Kael. A massive underground creature burst upward. A trap. Kael jumped backward. Too slow. The creature's claws ripped through the ground. Doc immediately moved. The tiny skeleton slammed his medical staff into the earth. A golden barrier appeared. Boom. The attack collided. The shockwave destroyed the village wall behind them. Kael landed. His expression changed. Doc had blocked an attack from a monster far stronger than him. Skill discovered. Soul medic ability. Emergency protection. Effect. Protects contracted master during critical danger. Kael stared. You're not just a healer. Doc looked away awkwardly. Almost embarrassed. You've been hiding things. Doc immediately looked innocent. Very innocent. Suspiciously innocent. The battle problem. Kael looked around. The village walls were damaged. The civilians were trapped. The enemy was intelligent. And he had no weapon. No combat summons. Almost no mana. One tiny skeleton healer. The system appeared. Emergency quest updated. Objective. Protect Elderwood Village. Current survival probability. 8%. Kael sighed. 8%. That's almost insulting. Correction. Previous calculation. 0.4%. Kael paused. Thank you. The strategy. Everyone expected him to attack. Every hunter fought the same way. Find the strongest enemy. Defeat it. Win.